Hello and welcome to Your Daily Detroit for Thursday, February 24th, 2022. Today, we talk transit. I've gotten a lot of questions in the inbox about this one and how the most recent drama came to pass. We get into Auburn Hills in Oakland County attempting to opt out of SMART, the suburban bus system, as well as the prospects for a renewal of the SMART millage in the Tri-County area, and try and predict to see if we will have another attempt at a regional transit authority funding millage later this year. To help me sort it out, David Gifford. He runs Transit Guide Detroit, providing independent advocacy and marketing for transit in Southeast Michigan. Let's get started. Joining me on the line, David Gifford. He is a transit advocate. He is the man behind Transit Guide Detroit, and somebody who keeps his ear to the ground on what's happening with all things mass transit. Welcome back to Daily Detroit, sir.
Hey, thanks, Sheriff. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's unpack the most recent things that happened. You know, we've been sharing some things on Twitter and such, but what on earth happened in Auburn Hills? Now, they basically have voted, their city council has voted to opt out of SMART, even though their voters voted for SMART. Like, I have 7 or 8 emails going, I don't understand how this is even possible.
Oh, certainly. For the past, Smart Bus has a millage system in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, and every 4 years, that millage comes up for renewal. And the way it was structured when SMART was formed in 1989 was that whole cities could opt out of SMART. So for the last 3 elections, when they got the vote to, was on the ballot to renew SMART, Auburn Hills has overwhelmingly approved the renewal of the SMART millage in the city. And the city council seems to have a particular beef with SMART. They claim there's communication problems. They claim there's been the problems with service. Granted, the last 2 years we have been in a pandemic, and they are short on bus drivers, they're short on mechanics. So, yeah, things have been kind of hard for that. Ridership has fallen off as well. And claims about empty buses are not completely false, but they're also situational right now. So the city council decided to hold a transit workshop, and transit advocates in the area caught wind of this. It had been kind of buried, and they found out about it, so they put a rallying cry, and a few weeks ago they went to this transit workshop, and then the following city council meeting that was after it, and everyone gave their piece about, hey, you guys shouldn't opt out of SMART. A lot of people depend on this, students, employers, employees, people in the Pontiac area, and Great Lakes Crossing and all the retailers up there. So they said, okay, we'll kick this down the road, and we'll have another meeting about this before we put it on the agenda. Well, they put it on the agenda, and then on last Monday, about 50 people showed up at the meeting. They all spoke favorably of SMART. Everyone from, there's a letter from the city of Pontiac, and a letter signed by Dave Coulter, and a whole bunch of officials from Oakland County saying, please, even the MTA in Flint, which has a connection to Great Lakes Crossing that hooks up with the SMART Fast Bus there, they even wrote a letter saying, do not opt out of SMART, please. And despite all the testimony that was given, they said, we're not moved. We would like to vote in favor of dropping SMART and putting a new millage on the ballot in the fall. That would only be a half a mil. Right now, the millage is around 1 mil. And this new system they're proposing would just be a weekday service only for seniors and people with disabilities. So no service on the weekends, no connections to Great Lakes Crossing, no connections on the Flint. So it's a pretty big deal.
You know, I can't help but think, and I haven't talked to someone about this, but I have learned over the years that when something pops up very quietly in any sort of governmental situation, somebody was aiming for their shot and just waiting for their time.
Oh, certainly. I think what's the rule? You have to at least put the announcement in a newspaper. So typically, if you scan the back of your local, like CNG News or Oakland County or Times or whatever it is, in the very back, there's these little windows that say public announcement for the city, rezoning of this property and one thing or another. So as long as they've checked that box that, well, we put it out there, we can go ahead and do our meeting and do our business.
What would be the material impact if this actually goes through? Say, you know, to the smart system, something where it's only a service that's only available to people who are disabled and seniors and only on a few days a week seems like a very limited option. And also something that I feel like, would be probably handed to, say, a private company.
This would be a huge blow to the city of Pontiac, to Detroiters, to people in the entire region that work and shop and dine up in that area. They claimed in city council meeting that, they interviewed the management at Great Lakes Crossing. They said, oh, no one here rides transit. And there's, I think I looked up, there's like 160 some stores in the mall itself. There's hotels surrounding it. There are other retail centers around it. There's a whole strip mall to the north of it with Kohl's and all kinds of other places in it. And then the last stop is at the Auburn Hills Meijer. So you're cutting off people's grocery supply. You're cutting off their jobs. You're cutting off their shopping. It would have a huge impact to that area. And it kind of speaks to the way we've divvied up our region and our counties when you look at Auburn Hills and the fact that it's kind of a upside down shaped L city where they kind of took over the rest of Pontiac Township. Pontiac has the city limits and Auburn Hills incorporated in the 80s, and it took over the rest of the Pontiac Township. So they have a narrow strip going north and then a narrow strip headed west at the very top of that township there. And so they have control over the downtown, a lot of industrial area and the Stellantis headquarters. And then they have that, one of the biggest malls in the region. And by cutting that off, it would be huge. A lot of people could lose their jobs, not to mention that connection to Oakland University.
Yeah, that's one of the things that gets me is that you've got a major college and then you have a major employer in Stellantis. I find it difficult and implausible to consider Stellantis a player in mobility when you've got a headquarters that isn't going to be connected to transit. And I know that they stood by the sidelines on this. They didn't provide any statement, but Oakland University did come out in support of SMART, correct?
Yes, they did. You've also got Oakland Community College here too, right down the street.
So Auburn Hills is talking about the issues with services, but didn't some routes just get readjusted and some new services added? I understand that there's a flex system. Now, I had to do some research on this. I'm in the city of Detroit. We are comparatively awash in transit compared to, other places of the region. Can we talk about this flex service and also some of the changes that SMART has, just implemented to try to make Auburn Hills happy?
Oh, certainly. Just a couple of years ago, SMART introduced their fast bus system, and one of the major routes is the fast forward route. These buses come every 20 minutes or so, and they go from downtown Detroit. They were originally up to Pontiac, and then they, within the last few years, expanded it all the way up to Great Lakes Crossing. So 7 days a week, you have a all-day bus that connects from downtown Detroit to Great Lakes Crossing and just beyond to the Meijer in Auburn Hills. So that's a pretty recent bus route, and within the last year, they actually redesigned where some of the routes go into to Auburn Hills and to Oakland University as well. So they've just barely begun to take hold, and then COVID hit, which really affected the ridership. But I don't feel like they've really been given a chance to really take hold there. Another thing that the city council was complaining about was that these routes aren't good enough for the city, that they don't go enough places. And one of the things that keeps that from happening is their neighbor, Rochester Hills, which opts out of transit. If they were an opting community as well, those routes could go all the way through to Shelby Township, to jobs at Amazon, go down through Troy. They could connect further, but they can't because there's a township-sized hole in the system right next door to them. Another thing that they have in Auburn Hills and Pontiac area is a system called Flex, and it's kind of like Uber basically, but unlike Uber, which is subsidized by their backers in Silicon Valley, and I believe it's publicly traded, so they have financial backing that way, but they just bleed money every year. And through the pandemic, they've been getting harder to find and also even more pricey. The great thing about the Flex system is that it's partnered with VIA, and prices start at $2 and they cap out at $8. Granted, you can only ride them in a Flex zone currently. I think there's about 4 different Flex zones. Dearborn, there's one that covers Chesterfield area and Hall Road. There's one in the Royal Oak, Troy area, and then there's the one in Pontiac. As the system expands, it would expand to more of the area. So you can currently only ride within the area. But the price, you can't beat the price. first of all. And secondly, unlike Uber, you can go on your profile on the app and request a wheelchair accessible vehicle. That's something that Uber and Lyft currently do not offer in the Michigan region.
I don't think enough people know about that service. And I didn't even know the number of cities that it had expanded to. I think part of this equation, too, needs to be about marketing so people know this. Like, I feel like we should do a thing where we go ride the Flex system and use it and show people. Because, I bet you if I polled most of my listeners, even though they're tuned into transit, I'm not sure all of them would know that Flex is a thing.
It's hard to compete with the budget of automotive marketing. They spend billions a year, and you even see automotive marketing in the back of buses. And we don't see enough transit marketing around town. We don't see the signs on the highway that said, stuck in traffic, you could be on a bus, or just anything. We need to have more of a presence out there, more commercials, more social media, more paid marketing to get this kind of stuff out there. Because like any marketing, you have to lead people to things.
What's next? I understand that the city of Pontiac raised some concerns because, well, if it wouldn't be Metro Detroit if we didn't have a weird Byzantine system of interlocking departments and authorizations and everything else.
Transit is unnecessarily difficult, and the layers upon layers here. In Oakland County, there's the Oakland County Regional Transit Authority that is who receives the money and gives it to SMART. So apparently, at the meeting, something came out that or Oakland County Regional Transit Authority has to approve this opt out because it is an opt out year. There was some back and forth on whether or not it mattered the timing, if it had to be done in January or not. But basically, if Auburn Hills wants to opt out, a 2/3 majority has to approve their opting out. And it sounds like that could be something that could prevent this from happening.
Could this be a harbinger of things to come? I mean, transit has had a very rocky history in Metro Detroit, and it seems like, outside of the city of Detroit, there are very patchy commitments to making transit work. This is something where in 2022, there will be, a renewal of the smart millage put up there. There is some talk about kind of reviving some RTA. To me, I feel like there will be a lot of people who are not for transit, who are against mass transit, and don't think it's valuable, who will look at the pandemic numbers and use that as leverage to say, we don't need this anymore and cut it out completely.
Well, I'm always worried about Macomb County because the county itself opts in as a whole. And the last time in 2018, they had the renewal. It only passed by about 30-some votes. They did a recount. It was so close. Historically, it's never been that close in Macomb County. But politics have certainly swung there quite a bit. But if anything, I think in Oakland County, I don't think we're going to see more cities trying to drop out. There's a recent push to unite all of Oakland County and fully opt into SMART. TRIO just announced a campaign today to push for that, and I believe Dave Woodward was pushing for that as well when he was on the interview with me on WDET. So that could be it could swing in the other direction in Oakland County.
Do you think that there could be a future where it's, say, just Oakland and Wayne and Washtenaw? I even saw another politician talk about a plan that's just Washtenaw and Wayne to connect the airport, kind of do a coalition of the willing. I mean, to be very honest, it's kind of difficult to drag people along if you have a majority of a county, for instance, that says they don't want to do something. Is including the people that you can better than stopping everything for people who don't want to be there?
I know a few years back they were trying to, a lot of it is tied up in the way the language was written in the bills for the RTA and with transit in general, that they would have to basically propose a bill or change language to undo the way things are now. The RTA was written that all four counties had to fully vote and opt in 100%. And a lot of the fringe townships were not happy about that because they, even in the couple plans in 2016 to 2018, those outer townships didn't receive more service. They would get money towards community transit, of course, but a lot of people don't really realize the benefits of that and what that would mean. So the last time they tried to separate it and make it so Oakland and Wayne and Washtenaw could put their own millages on ballots for public transit, Macomb, who has been dragging their feet and has become pretty anti-transit, said, well, you can't opt us out of this. So they basically died on the House floor. when Lee Chatfield was presiding over the Speaker of the House. They kind of reached a stalemate, and then shortly thereafter, COVID hit. So it's been kind of off the books for a while.
Well, I know from talking to people who make site selections, who are looking to invest, it is a hobbling that Metro Detroit has because we do not have a functional transit system. I mean, it exists, but it is nowhere near many other places. And I recently went to a couple different other cities that have basic systems, but they work. And it's stunning to see the difference in economic development. And so that's why I can't help but think, should there be some sort of political push to say, like, all right, maybe we do really need to separate this, or maybe even redraw the line so that more dense areas, population dense areas have service. The other side of that I see is that the areas that have service, I believe, will get a lot more large investment, which is something that, frankly, Detroit needs. And paying for transit service seems like a better deal than all of the huge amounts of incentives that we are throwing at companies right now.
Oh, certainly. And the other problem is we don't feel unlike transit, we don't feel those incentives directly from our pocket. Like recently they gave $600 million to GM to develop 3 different sites and add more jobs, and they tout these jobs as great. But when we try to expand transit, they say, you have to dig in your own pocketbook. You've got to feel this directly in your home taxes, your property taxes to make this happen. So we give this money to these corporations and to roads, and they take the money and they rebuild these giant roads and they make these new factories. And usually these factories are in fringe areas where transit riders can't even reach. And then they expect transit riders to pay for all the funding to make this happen. Meanwhile, they're subsidizing the auto industry and the auto infrastructure.
Do you think that we might see something new about a regional transit authority millage directed at that in 2022, or do you think that that's going to pass by?
I think that's going to pass by. They've found in the past that there's kind of the overlap between the smart vote and the RTA millage. I believe they don't feel that's a good fit for trying to put those on the ballot at the same time. So I don't think we're going to see anything until 2024.
And that reminds me that we need to talk about the smart millage. What would that be for people to renew? Would it be the same? Is it increased? Do you know what the plan is?
It's just a continuation. There's no increase this year that I know of. So it wouldn't affect anybody any differently to keep passing it along. The problem with the 4-year millage is that it's not long enough to make concrete plans to improve transit for the long term. If there's that, this is kind of funny. It goes back to one of the problems we had with our early interurban and streetcar systems. There's the 30-year streetcar war in Detroit where the mayors were busting up these monopolies of energy companies, gas and electricity, and they were eyeing the trolley companies because they were kind of holding the city hostage with their streetcar service. And the city was trying so hard to buy them out that they were undermining them. They were trying to get them out of their contracts, that if a contract expired, they would have to take the tracks up out of the street. So it basically caused the private company, the DUR, to underinvest in their system. And by the time the city bought it, it was pretty much in shambles. And they had spent all their money buying the system, and they had to spend the rest of their money upgrading the system, so they weren't able to build the subway they planned to do. And so when you can't make long-term plans that, they could drag their feet on upgrading to electrical streetcars. When you don't have long-term plans to invest in and upgrade things, you can't do it, and you're not willing to do it. So, if SMART couldn't say, put in a BRT route, because in 4 years that funding could go away. And they've invested all that money to build this thing. That's why the RTA was important, that they could actually do a 20-year funding mechanism.
So basically, we're locked in place right now.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the criticisms that I've heard is that there is not enough service from SMART. Is that an issue of just not raising enough money? I did some research around different cities, and Detroit does not spend very much money. Metro Detroit does not spend very much money on mass transit per person compared to other places.
I mean, if you look at the total budget, if you add up, our transit authority covers the People Mover, SMART, CDOT, and the Ride in Ann Arbor. And I think our budget totals somewhere around $300 million a year. And you look at a city like LA that's spending $6 billion a year on public transit. Even the RTA would have only about doubled the current budget, so we'd be about half $500 million a year for our transit budget overall. One of the numbers I always look at is when the streetcar service, when the DSR was in its peak, They had over 2,000 buses and nearly 1,000 streetcars in service. We have maybe 600 buses trying to cover this entire region now of 4 million plus people. We're spread so thin when it comes to trying to cover the entire region.
If you think about it, LA is a city where lots of people drive, and they're still investing in transit.
Oh, sure. They have some of the, every Thanksgiving, we see the same images of all the cars stuck on traffic with 10-lane wide highways. And the old saying of, just add one more lane, that'll fix it. They have huge highway systems, and they also have their streetcar conspiracy and the long highway going up California, just like we have our highways here and our lack of streetcars. But they still have buses. They've got trains and subways and everything. And it's a prosperous region. I think that we forget, or maybe we just don't know. Maybe people just don't leave the area enough to really understand what a prosperous region can look like. We've just accepted that prosperity here looks like a large Strode with your Costco and all your fast food and restaurants lining the road. This is our American prosperity, but that's not it.
Well, if people want to get involved and want to do something, what is the big push and project up ahead that people need to have on their radar? Is it that smart millage renewal?
The smart millage renewal is certainly the big thing coming this fall, and we certainly want to make sure that passes in all the communities. The other push is True just put out this call today, call to action. The Transit Riders United, the nonprofit in the area, the Transit Advocate Group, and they are pushing for Oakland County to go all in on SMART and have the entire county be an opting county.
Well, David Gifford, you can follow him on Twitter, DE_Gifford, or at Transit Guide Detroit. I appreciate your time and kind of sorting out everything that's happening. I'm sure we'll check in later because if there's anything, the transit drama does not seem to stop around here.
No, it does not.
Before I let you go, know that I'm thinking of the people of Ukraine, and we're working on an episode looking at the local impact as 20,000 plus Ukrainian Americans are right here in Metro Detroit. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and I'll see you around town.